Hi everybody, and welcome back to another big day here in American government. For this set of videos, I wanted to discuss a couple articles looking at presidential rhetoric and the history of the presidency. In particular, I like these articles because I wrote one of them, and it's very good. But really, I wanted to show them because I think it's an interesting sort of debate in political science, looking at different types of evidence, interpreting it differently, and talking about how the presidency has changed over time, how that interacts with technology, public opinion, and all the things we've talked about throughout the class. So with that said, let's get started with the article by Ryan Teaton. So one of the big debates in the study of the presidency is, when did the presidency sort of change, and why has it changed over time? And one of the big arguments here is that we can look at this through the idea of rhetoric, how presidents speak. Specifically, we're going to look at State of the Union addresses, and we're going to see, has there been a change in how presidents communicate with their constituencies over time? Have presidents sort of adapted what they do? How have they adapted it? And potentially, why have they adapted it? So, in his article, and you should all read this for the quiz and for life, Teaton talks about three different eras of the presidency. He talks about them in terms of the type of rhetoric that was used, the type of language that was used, and things like that. Traditionally, scholars have thought of the presidency as having two basic eras, the traditional era and the modern era. And the traditional era is the first era of the presidency, and people debate whether it started with Teddy Roosevelt or all the way going up to FDR in the 30s. But that era marked the first era of the presidency, while the modern era started after that. Whoever you think it started with, it started after that. So Teaton looks at rhetoric. His argument is rhetoric's going to change significantly between these two eras. And so what he does is what we call a content analysis of States of the Union, where he looks at the length of the addresses and the type of words they use. So figure 1 here on the screen shows the word length. How long were State of the Union addresses? And as you can see from the graph, the first few presidents gave very short addresses. Then you see an increase over time, and then as we get to the modern era, you see back to a decrease. It's interesting here because Teaton's the first person to argue that this is divided into three separate eras: a founding era, a traditional era, and a modern era. This is a relatively new contribution to the literature, and it shows that presidents back in days of yore, way back in the night, if you will, acted differently for several presidencies than that sort of traditional period. The idea that they spoke for shorter amounts of time is different than this traditional period where they were more long-winded, more verbose. And then we get to the modern period, we go back to the shorter addresses, as you can see here in figure 1. There's all those spikes sort of in the middle, and then it goes pretty much flat through the modern period. So that's what Teaton finds when he looks at word length. Presidents were more brief during the founding period and the modern period than they were in the traditional period. Smash cut here to figure 2. And Teaton looks at the use of the words we and our in his analysis. And what he finds is, during a traditional period, presidents used this we, our language, inclusive language, a lot less than presidents in the modern era, and somewhat less than those in the founding era. Why is this important? Well, good question. It's important because it's a measure of inclusivity. It's a measure of how presidents were trying to tie you to their rhetoric, trying to tie you to things, trying to bring you closer to things. You know, if I talk about we, if I talk about our, I'm trying to connect you and I together. We have a shared fate, shared fortunes. If things are going well for you, they're going well for me. If they're going well for you, they're going well because of me, your president. I want to make us feel like we're part of the same team. And I'm doing that in a way to make us feel connected. You know how politicians do that. Bill Clinton during the 1990s was an example of, the great empathizer. They talked about how he would say, I can feel your pain. And that shows that he was connecting with you in a way. We see again during the founding period, very, sort of generous use of these words. During the traditional period, you find a lot less use, and then during the modern period, a lot greater use, and increasing over time. What does that mean for the presidency? Well, it means presidents are trying to be more inclusive, more connected with the people, and more populist effectively. So that's what we have for his analysis. It's interesting. It teaches us a lot about the presidency just by looking at the words they choose in the State of the Union address.